So, the question on everyone's mind about the new How to Train Your Dragon live action remake is why? I mean, it's directed by the same dude who co directed the animated version and maintains a ton of the same sequences, too. Honestly, I'm not really sure of the answer. As an ancient threat endangers both Vikings and dragons alike on the Isle of Berk, the friendship between Hiccup, an inventive Viking, and Toothless, a Night Fury dragon, becomes the key to both species forging a new future together. So the original How to Train Your Dragon is pretty much a perfect movie in my book. There is an incredible amount of emotional depth and heart, combined with relatable and witty humor, and then features animation that is stunning, all supported by a friendship that is selfless and pure. And the new live-action version sticks so much to the same heart that it's difficult not to compare any slight differences between the two. Dean DeBlois returns to helm this version, using his experience as co-director of the animated film to then inform and recreate the world of Berk, Hiccup, Toothless, and then, just the rest of the Viking and Dragon land. So much of this looks like a shot-for-shot remake, which in one aspect is impressive that they're able to recreate the same level of detail. But other areas do differ, even in small ways. Some don't help or harm the storytelling, while a few I felt weakened the story and then negated small bits of rationale. Now, the progression takes us through the introduction of the village, its inhabitants, and then the scourge of dragons that bring destruction and take food. Even the way Hiccup captures and then befriends Toothless, it's identical. We watch Hiccup traipsing through the forest, looking for this downed dragon. And after swatting at a branch that returns to then hit him in the face, which is always funny, he notices broken trees and then skid marks on the ground. And this shot was exactly how it was displayed in the animation, which I thought was nice. And the movie also makes certain to keep the iconic moments in without altering them. So the dance that Hiccup has to do, which resolves in him touching Toothless, or the test flight that starts off extremely rough and ends with trust and confidence. And all of these are integral to maintaining the emotional draw of the story and creating the believable, unbreakable bond that eventually exists between Hiccup and Toothless. Mason Thames, who portrays Hiccup, he does an amazing job at capturing the uncertainty and timidness of the character, being mousy, overlooked, discounted, and just generally seen as a failure of a Viking. But through this, he also expertly displays the necessary compassion, attentiveness, even ingenuity that makes Hiccup the unassuming hero. And Thames became Hiccup for me. I mean, even though he didn't sound like Jay Baruchel, who voiced the animated Hiccup, Thames is still able to make the character his own while keeping some of the self-effacing charm and wit that endeared us to the first version. Nico Parker plays Astrid, and she too embodies the essence and persona of her animated counterpart. I love the strength and no-nonsense disdain Astrid has for people who just don't take their training seriously. And Parker is able to display that convincingly without becoming someone we dislike due to her rigid toughness. The dynamic that Parker shares with Thames makes their friendship and then eventual relationship believable and endearing because they complement each other's strengths, both physical and emotional. And Gerard Butler is right in his element, reprising his role as Stoic the Vast. The character is larger than life, and Butler plays it to the hilt, over-exaggerating all his mannerisms to create the bold chief of Berk that he is. And even the awkwardness that's shared between Stoic and Hiccup, it's demonstrated excellently by Butler and Thames. We could feel that emotional discomfort between them as they struggle to find any sort of common ground. But what also makes this story so powerful is the growth that we get to see within both of the characters. And despite Butler's massive presence within the story, the softness that he has to showcase comes through loud and clear. Because the character of Gobber is more of a rotund and larger guy, Craig Ferguson is swapped for Nick Frost, and while the accent and some deliveries are different, Frost manages to retain the lovable and funny demeanor that makes Gobber so irresistible. He's the softness that Stoic needs when it comes to the dynamic between father and son, and Frost is able to be that cushion while still being hilarious and snarky. Now, there is at least one point in this film that the live action changes, or rather omits, and for me, it was kind of a biggie, because it removed a moment of rationale that comes later in the film, and it also took out a moment of joyful humor, too. In the animated film, when Hiccup and Toothless have their test flight, there is a dangerous moment where both of them almost died, and they then have a celebration. Hiccup raises his arm and shouts, and then Toothless shoots a fireball, which leaves Hiccup toasty and slightly burnt. That's a great moment they share of celebration, but what that then leads to is a scene where some tiny dragons are trying to steal Toothless's fish, and he shoots a fireball into one of their mouths, informing Hiccup that dragons aren't so fireproof on the inside. Now, while on its own, this isn't an important sequence, but it works to then set up the final boss battle. In the live-action movie, we don't get that short scene where Hiccup discovers that fire on the inside can harm a dragon. But when there's the showdown at the end, Hiccup somehow knows how to defeat the Alpha. I mean, I know this is veering into territory that's just quibbling over little tiny elements. I get that. But from a storytelling perspective, it's a larger item that's unaddressed, especially if you're not familiar with the animated movie. But outside of that, the only other area that I could really criticize is with one specific moment of CGI. For as much as we get to see dragons flying and fire being spewed, the visuals are wonderful. Toothless looks realistic, and it retains that cat/dog vibe that makes him so endearingly lovable. There's a moment when Hiccup takes Astrid on a flight for the first time, and as they are cruising up above the clouds, the coloring and the grain on the film make it appear very fake. This was the only time I even noticed any wonkiness. All the other sequences that involved the dragons or other effects were convincing and had both believable textures and colorings. I mean, now admittedly, there could have been some visual saves just thanks to a lot of the action taking place in darker areas or at night, but there are times during training that happen in the broad daylight, and these dragons are spectacular. Now, the musical score is also still brilliantly produced. John Powell returns to compose the poignant and emotionally piercing orchestral music that just helps to make the story as resonant as it is. From the main theme to just the way Toothless and Hiccup's themes interweave during their test drive, every song is powerful and it's moving. I mean, it gave me chills all the way through the movie, and it continued to reinforce just all the touching story beats. So the question still remains about why the same director would revisit his previous work just to make a live-action version. Well, according to a Fandom Wire article from November of 2024, DeBlois learned that the studio was gonna make a live-action version with or without him. So in order to protect a property that he cared so deeply about, he signed on to helm the remake, ensuring that it would retain the heart and soul of the beloved animated version. And while this isn't an exact shot-for-shot remake, so much of it is so close that it's difficult to see the changes, outside of a few obvious differences here and there. I mean, if you've heard me talk before about live-action remakes, you know I'm pretty much against all of them. They feel like lazy cash grabs that worsen the original by removing the heart and or soul from the production. Now, for this remake, I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed it, and especially appreciate how well the original was honored throughout the process. I mean, I still prefer the animated version, just mostly out of nostalgia, but as long as DeBlois is directing the remakes of the Dragon series, I'm going to give him a go. Now, for any parents of littles, just know that this version is a little over 2 hours, so the kiddos could become restless. There were several young'uns in the screening that I was at, and by about that 90-minute mark, they were starting to vocalize how they'd hit their wall. Now, I didn't notice the time, and I'm not totally sure where that extra came from, but if you are thinking of taking smaller kids, just beware that they may not want to sit still and quiet for the entire thing. Overall, How to Train Your Dragon is a satisfying and emotionally sound remake, honoring the works before through competent storytelling and excellent casting choices. While there are some noticeable differences between the versions, the live action deftly delivers wit, charm, laughs, and tears, all while showing us the majesty of the winged creatures and the rough and tumble Vikings that provide so much personality and depth to a coming-of-age story about acceptance and change. There's no sex, nudity, or profanity, but there is some violence. I give How to Train Your Dragon 4.5 out of 5 couches. I am shocked that I enjoyed this as much as I did, especially with how perfect the animated version is. But hey, there you go. Okay, are there any live-action remakes that you loved or maybe held up to be just as good as the original? I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me. All hail Zorb.